Hey guys, welcome to Yesterday's Coffee, the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, and business, all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday. Today, we are covering foundational exercises, so the exercises that should make up the bulk of your program, no matter really what it is that you're training for. So there's a lot of different exercise plans out there. There's all kinds of different methodologies as far as how do you set up your training depending on what your goal is, but it really still comes down to using these same types of exercises over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I think these exercises get overlooked sometimes because people have gone over them and demonstrated them and done them a million times. Mm-hmm. So now the things that draw the most attention are the weird out there exercises, which are what draw beginners in and people who may be just starting out a new routine or a new program. But it's very important to start with these basics and make sure that you have some sort of mastery of them, I think, before trying out some of those weird, funky things that people like to do. And still continuing on with them. Oh, absolutely.
It's not like you get to a point where you get rid of these.
Yes. Honestly, you don't really need to do the weird ones, but these would be the ones to focus on, if anything. But even if you're curious about other things, these are the foundational movements.
Yeah. So what are the foundational movements?
So what are they specifically? Or what is a foundational movement?
What is a foundational movement? What are the patterns?
So the patterns of foundational movement are a push, a pull, a squat, a lunge, a hinge, a twist or a rotation, and then some sort of carry or some sort of walking exercise,
carrying
basically.
Weight. Yeah.
Yes, you're carrying weight.
Yeah, simple.
Yeah.
And so these are all just basic human movements. So they're concerning different planes of motion. So you can further break these down. So the first two that Alexa said, push and pull, those also have multiple vectors that you can go through. So you've got the vertical push, you've got the vertical pull, you've got the horizontal push, you've got the horizontal pull. When you start getting into an incline bench press, that's even going in between those. So there's tons of different variations within these. But what you'll find in any sort of good program is everything is grounded in some variation of these movements.
Yes. So basically every exercise that exists, I shouldn't say every, but most exercises that exist are going to link back to one of these foundational movements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So starting with push, basically you're looking at, as far as your big movements go, bench press would be in that horizontal category. Your military press or push press is going to be in your vertical zone, and that is going to be obviously a pressing movement focusing on either the pecs if you're in more of that horizontal pressing motion, or the shoulders, the delts for the vertical stuff. And that is something that you don't typically see being underutilized in a program, especially with guys. That is
I would not say that. I would say that for women, it is underutilized because most women won't even touch most pushes.
Right, but for guys men, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, but for men, there is no lack of push exercise in any program.
Yes, so that's where you'll see. And so the real key to all of this is understanding the balance that each of these play, because you'll go into a gym and you will see example after example of guys that do tons of pressing. And while it may not seem like that's that big of a deal, if you don't have enough balancing out the other side of that, so the pull in that case, then what you see is that rounded shoulder and that kind of collapsed posture look that is so prevalent, especially if you couple that with somebody that's working a desk job.
Oh, definitely. Because again, most daily habits involve us being here. We're either on our phone, we're driving our car, we're typing on our laptop. We're very rounded and very forward folded, just in general daily life. So you pair that, like you said, with a bunch of pressing, and we're just creating a very big imbalance that over time is going to give you a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of, back problems, shoulder problems, neck problems. You're going to end up with a lot of these imbalances that cause, pain at the end of the day.
Definitely.
Or they're going to keep you from getting to your goals
Mm-hmm.
in your exercise program.
Yeah. And that balance is there from not only a safety standpoint, but also from a strength standpoint. So taking bench press as an example, even though it's primarily a pressing exercise and your pecs and your triceps are what's doing the majority of the work, if you don't have the foundation, so in this case, which would be your lats, your back, to support that weight as you're bringing it down in the eccentric portion of the movement, sure, you can get your chest and your delts and everything else stronger to push more and more weight, but eventually you're going to hit that breaking point where you don't have the foundational muscles to stabilize the load as you're bringing it down, and that's going to put a major halt on your progress.
Well, and that's kind of the point of all of these foundational movements. They're all about stability and synergy and the whole body working together like it's supposed to get things done. So again, just like you should practice all these foundational movements, we need to make sure that they are practiced in a balanced format.
Yeah. So moving into the next one, our pull variation. So this goes as the antagonist to the press, and this could be any number of things from a barbell row, a dumbbell row, a pull-up, lat pull down. So again, we're talking about two different angles there, planes, and it's important to balance out both of those. So if you've got a bunch of horizontal pressing in your program, you're definitely going to want a bunch of horizontal pulling, and vice versa. And typically the rule of thumb when it comes to pressing to pulling is for every time you do a pressing exercise, you want at least one, if not more, pulling exercises to balance that out.
To balance it out. Well, and pulling is also incredibly important for your posture because, again, we know that people are here, just like we said. So whether you do too much pushing or not, just because of your daily life, pulls are going to be really important to keep your posture, which, again, can prevent any, neck problems, back problems in the future.
Yep.
So, having good posture in all of your exercises is important to begin with. And pulls can help to start correct that posture so that your daily life is better, but also the rest of your upper body exercises your form can be better in those too.
Yeah. And posture is a huge part of any exercise because even if you're doing a pulling exercise, if you aren't in the proper position, you might be engaging the totally wrong muscles.
Well, so again, if you're rounded here, but you're so rounded to the point where you have trouble getting your chest up or getting your shoulders back and down, again, if I'm pulling from here with my shoulders rounded, I'm not targeting the right muscles. Right. And I'm only furthering an imbalance.
Yeah. Yeah. So posture is huge. And doing these balanced out in a program is what helps maintain that posture.
So for most people just getting started, you want to do some presses just to build strength, but you're going to be doing way, way, way more pulls because, again, you need to correct your posture. You need to make sure you have good form so that when you go into your pushes, you have a good foundation.
Yeah, a lot of times I'll start people 2-1 pull to push.
Yeah. Or if people have like a very exaggerated, like forward,
Yeah, if it's extreme.
I might not give them any pushes.
Yeah. If it's super extreme, there might be a whole month phase where we're just focused on pulls. And then once we start to get that shoulder girdle into position, then we can worry about that. But if this is already super tight across the pec and the front delt, then adding more and more stress to that
it's not even going to make you stronger anyway.
It's not going to do anything terribly beneficial for you.
Yeah.
So what do we got next?
So lower body, moving on. First of all, we have squats, right? Which the main example being a squat.
Yes, that's pretty self-explanatory.
It's pretty self-explanatory. So squats are one of the biggest foundations for your lower body, being that it can help stabilize a lot of your lower body joints. Squats can be tricky because different variations of squats can target different muscles.
Sure.
But a squat is obviously one of like the most primal movements that we can have as human beings. So knowing how to do it the right way is very, very important.
I would say of this entire list, squat could definitely be argued for the most important spot. And there's one other that we'll touch on that I think could potentially fight with it. But squat is very, very important. If you can't manipulate your body weight to be able to go up and down with your legs with proper posture, then you are at major risk for tons and tons of injuries and problems down the road.
Definitely. Well, you have to think you're using, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. You're not using your legs all day long, but you would be actively using your legs typically more than you're using your arms and your upper body throughout the course of your day. So,
depending on what you're doing. Yeah.
Well, sure. But what I'm saying is if you don't have this foundational movement down, then throughout your entire day as you're climbing steps, as you're walking up hills, you're just furthering any imbalance that you already have.
Mm-hmm. And a squat is so important because it's training strength through a very large range of motion for knee flexion as well as hip flexion. And so even in everyday life, like if you find yourself and you trip over something and you have to catch yourself in a pretty fully knee flexed position, if you don't have strength in those areas of range of motion, then that is very easily going to lead to some sort of injury.
Absolutely. Well, like you said, so if you fall, for instance, the mechanics of a squat are going to be some of the same mechanics that are going to even allow you to stand up from that.
Yeah.
So whether you catch yourself or whether you fully fall, in order to get back up,
just even getting up,
that's going to take a lot of those same movement patterns, which is important for a lot of people as they get older.
Yeah. And that leads right into the next one, which is the lunge. So this is essentially a variation of a single leg squat. So whether that's a lunge, a split squat, a step up, anything where you're doing the major load bearing work on just one leg. This is obviously a major part of everyday life. We're walking creatures.
Constantly.
So you're always on one leg.
As, in things like steps that we come in contact every day.
Yeah, just moving through the house or like we've been doing, moving furniture or anything else that you just have to manipulate in everyday life. You're not always going to be in the best mechanically advantaged position, and having strength through that range of motion where your legs are extended, where you're getting into knee flexion with the load on primarily one leg, getting the glutes involved, being able to stand up, all of that is encompassed in the essence of a lunge.
Well, and like you were talking about with somebody potentially tripping and trying to catch themselves, yes, obviously both legs are involved in that situation, but I think the lunge is more important even than the squat here because you're catching yourself usually on one leg. So, you're not catching yourself typically with two legs down or both feet flat on the floor.
Right.
One leg is going to be out further or, you're going to have to catch yourself all of your weight on one side.
Yeah.
The other really important thing about the lunge is it involves more balance, which goes back to everyday life, but also kind of that same like tripping analogy where you can prevent situations like that if your balance is better typically.
Yeah. And you have to train one leg at a time, at least for some duration in order to build equal strength on both sides. Because especially while a squat is a phenomenal exercise and should be a foundation of what you're doing, if all you're doing is squats and leg presses and things that involve both legs at the same time, most people have a dominant leg or a dominant arm. And if you're only doing exercises that work both at the same time with a barbell or other sort of closed chain exercise, you're never going to see if there is a major imbalance or be able to bring that up.
Exactly. And in that situation, your strong leg is just going to stay the strong one.
Yeah.
Your weak leg will never be able to improve unless you focus on some single leg exercises.
Yeah. So now moving into the hinge, the hip hinge. So this is the other major one that I think
this one actually might be the most important.
Top spot. Yeah.
Like obviously squats and lunges can keep you from tripping and falling, get you up off the floor if you have fallen. But I think the hinge is more common in everyday life.
Yeah.
Especially for people who, if you're not to the age where like tripping and falling is really a major concern.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hinging really is a part of everyday life. Like you might not get down to a full squat every day, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to bend over
constantly
and
hinging
pick
all day
something
long.
up off the floor.
Yes.
And this is where, I mean, there are instances where ridiculously strong powerlifters have thrown out their backs bending over to pick up a pencil.
Yeah.
Like, it's one of those things where no matter how strong you get, if you're not keeping awareness of where your body is, your mobility is not good. There's a number of factors to it, but having these proper motor patterns and training them is paramount to staying healthy.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this goes back to the saying, like when people tell you to lift with your legs, but half of the world doesn't actually understand what that means.
Yeah.
This is what that means.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're hinging, we're keeping our spine neutral. We're keeping our back in a place where we're protecting our low back. We're not bending to get something.
Yeah.
We're hinging, pushing our hips backwards to reach for something that we're picking up. And then we're lifting by pushing our feet into the floor.
And this tends to be the toughest one to teach too. So many people, especially when they're brand new to exercise, don't have a great understanding of how to differentiate their lower back from their hips.
Mm-hmm.
And so their first move, and I tend to see this more in guys than girls, but it's definitely not like all girls have this down by any means, is that their first movement, if they're going towards something on the floor, is just folding at the lower back.
Yeah.
And
like completely rounded
their hips
forward.
haven't even moved. And it's like, we need to slow down so that we're actually allowing your hamstrings, your glutes to elongate and do the work that it's supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
Because the lower back is just the chain there. It's just holding the upper body and the lower body together along with the abdominals as like a brace to that core. It's not the one that is supposed to be the prime mover of that.
No,
movement.
not at all. Well, and that's why, we see so many people with low back problems, right? Is because they don't know they don't really understand that movement pattern. They don't really understand how to hinge and how to put the tension in their glutes and hamstrings, which should be stabilizing them and doing most of the work.
Yeah.
Not stabilizing, but should be doing most of the work, whereas the low back is kind of what is supposed to just keep you stable.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using their low back to take that whole load instead of the other way around.
Yeah. And like I said, a lot of times it's not even necessarily laziness as much as it is they just don't even know how to engage.
Don't understand
that area. So one of the main focuses I have with anybody that I work with is making sure that we hammer that hinge, because that movement is something you really need to get down. And once it clicks for you, it'll make a big difference, because a lot of times, a lot of people really do struggle with it. And the key is starting super light, super slow.
And literally just focusing on the form, like form only.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that is a big part of, I lost my train of thought. That another reason we have to focus on that is because most people end up being so dominant in the front side of their body.
Yeah.
So quad dominant, people don't really understand how to activate their glutes and their hamstrings, which again, we see back problems from, we see knee problems from, we can see ankle problems from. So really building strength in that foundational movement is important to keep your whole lower body functioning the way that it's supposed to and keep you from ending up in pain later on.
Exactly. Yeah, that is a great point, is the mirror muscles, so to speak, that get so heavily emphasized because you can see them. And
well, it's just like, we walk upstairs, we walk forward. We're not doing a lot of like pushing up through our heels and our glutes and our hamstrings because most people just aren't taught to.
Right.
We should be doing way more of that. But we're just, as, people who don't study that just don't know.
Yeah. So next up, the twist. So this is a little less, I would say, I don't know what's the word, regimented, as far as a twist can be anything. So whether you are doing a exercise like a Russian twist or a wood chop or something of that nature, but really just being able to create stability while you have trunk rotation.
Yes. Well, I think it's creating stability and core strength in rotation, but also encouraging flexibility in the mid-spine.
Mm-hmm.
Because as people get older, like that's one place people think about touching their toes. We think about stretching our legs, stretching our arms. Nobody really thinks about stretching kind of that area in the mid-back, which is, I think, a really important part of rotating. Because somebody just told me the other day that it was one of my clients, actually. She turned to the side and tweaked something in her back just by turning.
Yeah.
Because that's a place where she doesn't practice that much mobility or flexibility. And this is part of that. So this would strengthen, but allow more flexibility in that area.
Yeah. It's one of those things where the stronger you are in that plane, the less or the more resilient you'll be. So the less injury prone you'll be, because if you can be stronger in in stranger positions, then you're going to be much better off, because you're not going to find yourself getting hurt too often when you're in proper position. It's when you're in those weird spots, whether it's a twist, whether it's bending over and folding at the back, that's typically where you get hurt. So making sure that you incorporate some level of rotation into your programming so that you can begin to adapt to that motion goes a long way.
Absolutely. Well, and they say as you get older, that's like one of the most recommended, I don't know, like mobility exercises, like getting up in the morning and in bed kind of doing some like trunk rotations or some like open book exercises is what they recommend to a lot of people as they age to prevent issues like that.
Yeah. That's
so not just strengthening, but also that flexibility piece.
And our final piece of the puzzle here is the carry. So this is about as simple as it gets. Definitely another one you could put up towards the top as far as importance goes. And that's just being able to carry weight from one place to another. So I think the biggest and most prevalent piece you'll see for this is getting the groceries. Yeah. I know that that can be a badge of honor for a lot of people with the one trip. And that's how I live my life. I can't speak for everyone else, but it's got to be one trip with all the bags, no matter how many there are. Well,
and if you're talking about taking one trip with your groceries up into an apartment, then we're basically using the squat, the lunge, we can use the hinge, the carry, the twist.
It's just about all of them. And I mean, being able to pick something up and move it wherever you like to is obviously incredibly important. People
do it every single day. You carry your purse, you carry groceries, you carry a baby.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what other things do men carry?
Groceries. I mean,
the groceries.
And weights. That's
so I've got the baby, the purse, and the groceries, and you've got some groceries.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, the carry doesn't even have to be an even carry either. So while a primary exercise example of this would be like a farmer's walk, where you've got an even weight in each hand and you just walk for distance. Another great one is a suitcase carry. So, I mean, guys carry briefcases, I guess.
A suitcase. Yeah. Okay.
So
there's something.
I'm
just kidding.
But so when you've got weight loaded up in one hand, that kind of goes hand in hand with the twist there too, because we're talking about keeping
core strength, core stability,
the core balanced and stable even while the load is not centered. And so that's something that you'll see a lot in everyday life. There's not too many instances where you're going to be carrying weights that are perfectly even in both hands. And most of the time, you're just carrying something in one hand.
Definitely. Well, and it's not just about core stability and core strength either. It promotes stability in a lot of your joints, especially a lot of the lower body joints. But in a carry, if we're talking about daily life, that's the one thing that a lot of people get wrong is they don't keep everything stable.
Yeah.
They try and carry things and they have their neck and shoulders like all jacked up here.
Yeah,
and they keep their upper body really rigid. But you're like, okay, well, the upper body's not what's moving you. So you have to also think about keeping your core tight, your legs tight, your glutes tight.
Yeah, as anybody that has ever done a yoke walk, which is essentially where you put a ton of weight on your shoulders and walk with it, will attest to, is it's one of the best core exercises in the world, because the weight is loaded on your shoulders, you're obviously moving from your feet. And so your core is what's transferring that load.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is weak, you're going to feel it immediately. So incorporating carries into your workouts is a great thing to do for not only overall stability and core strength, it's great for your traps, your shoulders, developing that entire shoulder girdle.
But just being careful to not focus it all just up into your neck.
You're not.
You do have to bring some good form into
you're
carries
not
also.
Flexing your shoulders by any means. You're still just keeping quality posture. Your chest is up and your back is neutral, but making sure that you've got some element of a carry programmed in to your training is kind of that final piece of the puzzle that wraps all of these things up.
Mm-hmm. So when you're first getting started, before you try and go start any of these like crazy Instagram exercises or, Pinterest programs, maybe check out the foundational movements first. Build your program.
Maybe.
Okay, definitely check out the foundational movements first and build a program off of that, because you are going to get the best results, especially in your daily life and preventing injury in the future and building a solid foundation with these key exercises.
So these exercises are something that you're always going to be doing some variation of, and you'll know if your program is any good if it is based on this. If you're looking at it and you're like, wow, what I've been doing hasn't really included much of this, or you're missing a few of them, then that's definitely a time where you need to reevaluate what you're doing and make sure that there is this balance across each of the body parts that you're training and that your movements all balance out one another.
Well, and I think it's also important to note that these foundational movements are also movements, not just movements that can improve your daily life, but even if your goal is weight loss, so even if your goal is not strength related whatsoever, these compound movements are actually going to give you the best overall calorie burn, the best overall muscle growth out of any exercises that you could be doing.
Yeah, they all involve multiple muscle groups. And obviously the more muscles you involve in an exercise, the more potential you have for calorie burning. If weight loss is your goal, that's a good thing. If muscle building is your goal, the more muscle that you can stress in an exercise, that's a good thing as well.
Exactly. So no matter what your goal is, these apply.
Yes.
So go do your foundational movements.
Yes. Make sure they're a part of everything that you do and that they're well thought out. So thank you guys for tuning in this week. If there's anything that you'd like us to cover specifically, you can reach out to me at HypertroFit.com. Alexa can be found at TheRootedRD.com. And until then, we will see you guys next week.
See you guys next week.